Hours now before the polls close in Nebraska and Iowa at 8 o'clock tonight.
And that's also when we begin receiving early results. 6 News' Jacqueline Fernandez joins us to explain which ballots are counted first and what those results could show.
John, Aaron, early voting totals will come down first. Now, in past elections, those initial results tended to lean more Democratic. Then at 8:45, we'll get results of people who voted this morning. An hour after that, the first round of evening ballots will be released. Then the final results will drop at 10:45. Douglas County votes are tallied at the Election Commission at 120th and Center. We're told in the counting room there are 2 people of different parties with election staffers. Officials say no part of this process is overlooked.
We have a post-election audit administered by the Secretary of State. So they will give us 3 different races in 3 different ward and precincts, and we will go and get the physical ballots that were ran through the machine. We will sit down and hand tabulate those to make sure they match up in order to.
Quite a process. Now, if you dropped off a mail-in ballot yesterday or today, those results will not come in until Friday. Keep that in mind. Provisional ballots will not be counted until a week from Monday. That's the 18th. And that includes people who forget their photo ID and have to then go to an election office to certify their registration. Douglas County election results will be formally certified on the 21st. Aaron.